Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Right now, when a house, the very symbol of stability, the place where families gather, laugh, cry, and dreams suddenly loses its worth, you're not just talking about real estate, you're talking about lives being shaken. Imagine waking up one morning and the home you worked 30 years to pay off, the roof you thought would always protect you, is suddenly worth pennies on the dollar. That S, not just an economic crash, that S, an earthquake ripping through the very heart of Canada. The housing collapse isn't just economic, it's human lives being shaken to their very core. When people hear the word market, they often think about charts, graphs, and headlines on the evening news. They see red arrows pointing down and assume it's just numbers. But behind every number, behind every percentage point that drops, there is a real person, a real family, a real struggle. A housing collapse doesn't only mean the value of bricks and land goes down. It means the value of someone's life work. Their sweat, their sleepless nights, their endless overtime shifts suddenly gets erased. Imagine a family that saved for 10, 20, 30 years, cutting vacations, skipping luxuries, eating simply, just to afford a down payment, and then waking up one morning to find that the roof they sacrificed for has been devalued to almost nothing. That is not an abstract financial issue. That is heartbreak, betrayal, and devastation wrapped together. Think about the father who worked late nights, believing every extra shift was a step toward securing a better future for his children, only to see that future stolen by forces beyond his control. Think about the mother who held on to the belief that owning a home meant safety, that she was passing on stability to her kids, only to realize that her greatest investment is now a liability that chains her with debt. Young people who were promised that patience and hard work would one day earn them the keys to their own front door are now staring at a broken dream, wondering if that day will ever come. When the housing market collapses, it doesn't just take away money, it takes away hope, pride, and confidence. The collapse rattles communities. Neighbors see homes abandoned. Streets once filled with life suddenly look empty, and fear replaces the feeling of belonging. People who once looked forward to gatherings in their living rooms are now sitting at kitchen tables covered with bills, trying to figure out if they can keep the lights on. The weight of that pressure breaks marriages, tears families apart, and creates a ripple of emotional and mental stress that no headline can capture. When a home loses its value, it feels like the ground beneath people's feet has given way. This is why the housing collapse must never be looked at only through the lens of dollars and cents. It is not just an economic downturn, it is a human crisis, one that shakes the very foundation of trust, stability, and security that people build their entire lives upon. The crash destroys more than money, shatters dreams and security in ways that numbers alone can never explain. Money, when lost, can sometimes be earned back, rebuilt, or replaced over time. But the dreams attached to a home, the sense of safety it gives, and the stability it promises, those are not easily recovered. For many families, owning a home is not just about financial investment. It's about finally having a place that is theirs. A place where they can raise children, build traditions, and plant roots. When a housing market collapses, it doesn't just strip away equity, rips apart the vision of a future that people have been holding on to for years. Imagine a young couple who finally managed to buy their first home after years of saving, believing they had secured the foundation of their family's future. They thought they were stepping into stability. But now they are facing a nightmare mortgages that are higher than the value of the home itself. Debts they can't escape, and the crushing realization that what was supposed to be their dream has become a trap. The sense of betrayal that comes from watching your greatest milestone turn into your heaviest burden is something no economic chart can measure. Think of the older generation who worked their entire lives with the dream that retirement would be spent peacefully, in the comfort of a home they fully owned. For them, that house was supposed to represent decades of effort and sacrifice paying off. But when the crash erases the value of their property, it also erases their sense of safety. Suddenly, they are no longer looking at retirement with peace, but with anxiety, wondering if they can even afford to keep the life they built. Children too feel the silent weight of this collapse. When families are forced to move, when neighborhoods fall apart because people can no longer afford to stay, kids lose their schools, their friends, their sense of belonging. What looks like a financial collapse to the outside world becomes, in reality, a collapse of stability for the next generation. Dreams are delicate things. They're not just built on money, but on trust that the sacrifices people make will lead to something better. A housing crash doesn't just drain bank accounts, it breaks spirits. It makes people question whether hard work truly pays off, and whether the system that promised them security was ever built to protect them at all. This is a national identity crisis for Canada because, at its core, Canada has always been built on a promise: if you work hard, play by the rules, and stay patient, you can create a life of stability and dignity for yourself and your family. That promise has been woven into the culture for generations. The idea that homeownership is not just possible but attainable has been one of the strongest symbols of success and belonging in this country. A home was never just about shelter, it was about arriving, about being able to say, I made it, I carved out my place in this nation. But when the housing market collapses, that vision begins to crumble. Suddenly, what was once the Canadian dream starts to feel like a cruel illusion. The collapse doesn't just affect individual homeowners, it strikes at the heart of national pride. It forces people to question whether the values they were taught to believe in still hold true. If hard work no longer guarantees security, then what does? If years of saving, sacrificing, and striving can be wiped out overnight, then the story Canadians have told themselves about fairness and opportunity begins to unravel. This is why it's not just a financial downturn, it's an identity crisis. The faith people place in their country, their leaders, and the system itself begins to erode when the most basic measure of stability, a home, is ripped out from under them. Canada has always taken pride in being a land of opportunity, where people from every background can come and find a future. But when families who were born here, raised here, and worked here find themselves locked out of stability or stripped of it overnight, that pride is tested. A collapse of this magnitude doesn't just leave people poorer. Leaves them questioning whether the Canadian dream still exists at all. That's dangerous because when people stop believing in the dream, they stop believing in the system. And when they stop believing in the system, frustration, resentment, and division begin to grow. This crisis is not about numbers, it's about the collective spirit of a nation. If people no longer feel secure in their own homes, if they no longer believe their sacrifices will be rewarded, then the very foundation of trust that Canada stands on begins to shake. That's what makes this a national identity crisis, not just an economic one. It is the soul of the country being tested. When wealth disappears, trust in the system collapses too. Because wealth is more than just a measure of money in the bank, is the reflection of a lifetime of work, discipline, and sacrifice. People don't pour their time and energy into jobs, savings, and investments just for numbers on a balance sheet. They do it with the belief that their efforts will be protected, that the system will reward and safeguard them in the long run. When a housing collapse wipes out those savings and investments overnight, it sends a dangerous signal that the system people trusted to hold them up has failed. And when that trust is gone, the foundation of society itself begins to weaken. Think about the ordinary Canadian worker who has spent decades putting money into a mortgage, paying interest, following every rule, and doing everything right. They believed that by following the system, by working hard, saving carefully, and investing in property, they would secure stability for their family. But when the market crashes and the home they fought so hard to pay for is suddenly worth half its value, it feels like betrayal. The same government and financial institutions that encouraged homeownership, that promised stability through the housing market, now seem like unreliable partners. Trust turns to suspicion, and suspicion turns to anger.